There are hundreds of basic and alternate recipes in Satisfactory 1.0. Some of them are absolutely amazing, whilst others not so much. So I've made it my mission in Satisfactory to compare every single recipe in the game to inform you guys on what the best and worst recipes are. So welcome to the best recipes in Satisfactory 1.0 series. Today's video is all about the reinforced iron plates. These reinforced iron plates are one of the most crucial parts in the entirety of Satisfactory, and there are 4 different ways of making them. It is used to make dozens of vital items as well as very important pieces that will help your Satisfactory gameplay. In today's video, I'll be showing you the 4 basic ways of making reinforced iron plates, as well as one hidden recipe which I highly recommend at the very end of the video. There will be timestamps in the description and in the pinned message, so drop a like and let's begin the video. So let's begin with the basic reinforced iron plates recipe. For all these examples, we'll be making 10 reinforced iron plates per minute. Also, what I've done is I have added in exactly what we are using to make it and the total power consumption. Judging from a few of the comments in my recent videos, a few of you wanted this, so I hope that this is able to help you guys out. Starting on the right side, we have got our screws, and of course, some of you know where we're going with this. The reason why we have got iron ingots going straight into screws rather than involving iron rods is because of an alternate recipe which I highly recommend. This recipe is called cast screw. You can turn your iron ingots straight into your screws. And it doesn't consume any extra iron either. You literally just save out on having to make iron rods. And like I've mentioned in the last few videos, this saves you on space because you're using less constructors. It saves you on resources and it saves you on power as well. It's a fantastic recipe. To make your 120 screws, you're going to need 30 iron ingots. 30 iron ingots is created from 30 iron ore. This is a 1-to-1 ratio, which is very, very helpful. However, you could use, bam, the refinery. I've talked about this a lot, so I'll very quickly highlight this. You can always make pure ingots in the refinery. This means that you use less of your ores, and you're consuming the same amount of iron ingots as before, just again, less ores, but you also involve water. The downside is that the refinery is much bigger, it costs you more power, and of course, you need water. To get water, you have to place down the water extractor, which costs you power and resources, and you have to transport it from your water source up to your refinery. So the pros with this is that you get a lot more iron ingots, copper ingots, caterium, concrete, and copper sheets, as well as quartz crystals, but the downside is that you do have to use water, which is a bit of a shame. So those are the screws sorted out, extremely simple to make, so no worries there. The best part about it is that one smelter can make 30 iron ingots, so this is actually a rather efficient recipe. Moving on now to our iron plates, of which we need 60 of, and the ratio from iron ingots to iron plates is a 3-to-2 ratio, meaning for every 3 iron ingots you use, you create 2 iron plates. And of course, again, iron ore to iron ingots is a 1-to-1 ratio. This recipe is extremely simple, and if you do use this recipe, it's pretty good, so don't be too concerned about the other recipes I'll be showing you today. This is not too bad. In total, again, this is what we are using: 4 smelters, 6 constructors, and 2 assemblers. Bear in mind that the power outage that I have calculated is if every single machine here is 100% overclocked, whereas some of them won't be. So this is actually kind of overshowing some of the power that we are using, but do bear that in mind. But the maximum megawatts you'll be using here is 70. In total, this means that you are consuming 120 iron ore, which is actually a fantastic number. And that's because it's exactly 2 Mark 1 conveyor belts or 1 Mark 2 conveyor belt, which logistically makes life so much easier. It's also the equivalent of 1 Mark 1 miner at 100% efficiency on a pure node, which again is extremely good. So that's the basic recipe done. Overall, not a bad recipe at all. Now we are moving over to our bolted iron plates, and we are dealing with a very similar recipe, as you can see. We are still using iron plates, 60 per minute, that's the exact same amount as before. However, this time, we're using more screws. Before we were making 120, now it's 160, an increase of 47 screws per minute, obviously meaning that you are consuming more iron ore per minute. So what is the point? If you're making the exact same amount of reinforced iron plates, but you're using more iron, why bother with this recipe? Well, you actually end up saving on a little bit of power. And when I say a little bit, I literally mean a little bit. It's only about 7 megawatts of power in total. So if you are concerned about power, consider this recipe. However, it's also not the greatest in the world. Very quickly, I've got an entire playlist dedicated to the best recipes in Satisfactory 1.0. My target is to get through all the recipes in the game. Subscribing is the best way to support my work. I have a lot more videos coming out soon. Thank you. And without further ado, let's get straight back into the video. So the basic recipe consumed 120 iron ore, and the bolted iron plates consumed 132. These aren't the only two recipes though. Now let's move over to our stitched iron plates, which uses a lot less iron because we're getting wire involved. And in fact, I will come back to this recipe at the very end of the video because of something that's actually involved here with the wire. First of all, with the iron plates, again, it's a very simple recipe here. Although if you really wanted to, you can combine plastic with your iron ingots to form more iron plates. And you can also combine your iron ingots with steel ingots to get more iron plates as well. But for the sake of simplicity and efficiency and time and all that, I do kind of just recommend sticking to the basic recipe. Also, it involves a smelter, whereas these two both involve assembly. Actually, this one actually involves a foundry. And of course, they both require more power, more space, more time. Yeah, this is just easier. When it comes to wire, there's a couple different recipes you can go with. This is just the basic one though. And of course, with copper ingots, you can use the refinery to create wet copper ingots. This consumes less copper ore, but you do need water. For the sake, again, of simplicity and making things nice and easy to understand though, I've just left it as the basic recipe. In total, these are the resources we are consuming. 51 iron ore, which is a really low amount, and only 33.5 copper ore. So if you have got a bunch of copper ore lying around and you want to try and save on your iron ore a little bit, this is actually a fantastic recipe to go with. When we look at power consumption, we're only using 4 smelters, 5 constructors, and 2 assemblers, giving us a maximum power outage, or usage, of 66 megawatts, which, again, is not even that bad. Don't worry, by the way, if all this information seems like quite a lot, I will be doing an overall analysis at the very end of the video, so make sure you guys do stay tuned for that. Moving on, though, to our fourth and technically our final recipe, we have got one bonus recipe, which I'll show you in just a few minutes. It's the adhered iron plates, and this is the one recipe I don't recommend you go with. For the other 3, I can make some sort of strong case saying you might want to use this for the basic needs of it, this because it uses less power, and this because it uses less iron, which is pretty cool. But for this recipe, there's only one reason why you should be even considering this, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. Firstly, when it comes to iron plates, we're actually using less iron plates than the first couple of recipes, which is fantastic. This of course means that we're using less iron ingots and of course in turn less iron ore, which is fantastic. However, things start to take a slightly rough turn when you get rubber involved. We are using the basic rubber recipe of 15 crude oil to 10 rubber, although there are different ways to make this thing. What you could do is combine your polymer resin, which is literally made from heavy oil residue or fuel as a byproduct, things like that, or of course crude oil, and combine that with water to then form your rubber. If you wanted to do this, you would have to consume 20 polymer resin and 20 water per minute. Of course, water is another liquid. How are you going to belt this in or pipe it in? If you've got a water resource very close to you, fantastic. If not, this might be a bit complicated. The second recipe is the one that I'm currently using for this example, and the third recipe is technically the best, but unfortunately it's not quite as simple. To make your 10 rubber per minute, you only need 5 plastic per minute and 5 fuel per minute. Fuel is made from crude oil, and plastic is made from crude oil, so you can do that if you so wish. This is an example of us making 120 rubber per minute right here. We get the plastic and we get the fuel, and this is essentially how it works, but it's rather complicated, especially if you're just making 10 rubber per minute. If your water source is really far away from a refinery, you might want to try and package it. To use that, you then have to use a packager. So the water from the water extractor gets packaged into the packager, it then goes all the way around to your refinery area, where you then have to unpackage it, then that goes straight into the refinery. Doing this process consumes tons of power, time, resources, and it's just a pain. Not to mention the plastic used for the containers as well. So you might want to avoid using this unless you're making a large quantity of rubber or reinforced iron plates using rubber, where in that case you might want to use this if it's time efficient. In total, this is what we're consuming: 45 iron ore, which is a fantastic amount, and only 15 crude oil per minute, which really isn't that much. Unfortunately though, it does consume quite a lot of power. It's probably a bit less than what it says down here because we are calculating a refinery at 100% efficiency, but of course we're not using a refinery at 100% efficiency, so it will be slightly less than this, but it's still quite a high number for what you're actually making here, especially compared to previous examples such as the stitched iron plates, which I want to talk about a bit more. Remember when I said that there was another wire recipe I want to try and use? Well, this is what it is, and that's the iron wire alternate recipe. So rather than using copper to make your wire, you make iron, which is fantastic if you haven't got a lot of copper nearby, or if you've got tons of iron and you want to use that instead. It's a really good recipe, and that's exactly what we've done over here. In total, this requires 3 smelters, 5 constructors, and 2 assemblers, only consuming 62 megawatts of power, the lowest amount of power consumption in all the recipes I've shown so far. And the good part is it doesn't even end there as well, because look at this iron consumption. That is right, we are literally only making, or needing, 89 iron ore per minute. Compare this to the basic recipe of 120 per minute, and again, in the basic recipe, this requires 70 megawatts. So the stitched iron plate recipe with iron wire ends up saving you on power and iron. It really is the best recipe to make reinforced iron plates in Satisfactory 1.0. Here's the overall analysis. The basic recipe is good if you haven't got any other alternate recipes. Also, all around it's decent. It doesn't consume much iron ore, and the power consumption is okay. Regarding the bolted iron plates, this is good at saving you power, but you do end up consuming more iron ore. Now, moving on to the stitch iron plates, you do end up saving a lot of iron, but it involves copper. Luckily, the power consumption isn't that bad. Moving on to the adhered iron plates, this again saves you on a bit of iron, but it does involve crude oil and quite a lot of power. Finally, it comes to the stitch iron plates with the iron wire recipe. This saves you on iron ore and it saves you on power compared to other recipes. There we have all 4 reinforced iron plate recipes with a little bonus there on the end, which I recommend you using. Feel free to leave a like if you found this video helpful, and thank you for watching. Before we go, a massive thank you to our members: Mau Mau, Skull and Hattie, Lo, Nitormal, Chaos Rising, Cutthroat Zoo, Yummy Kel, and Tio Rico.